This is the Spokane Soccer Show, and I am your worker first, Labor Day loving host, Benji Wade. On today's show, Velocity FC are done with Jägermeister. They won't touch that stuff again until next spring. College soccer is in full swing, and that's obviously not a bad thing. As Whitworth pile up the wins, the Gonzaga men go 4-0 at home, and the Gonzaga women bounce back from a forgettable night in Fayetteville to grit and grind a win against the undefeated Jayhawks. All of that, plus I am joined by former Zag and current Florida State Seminole and soccer supernova, Giana Riley. But first, I want to start with a new segment. We're going to call this the Spokane Soccer Show Shoutouts. Shout out Whitworth Soccer. The women are 2-0. The men are 2-0. Junior forward Kylie Russell had 4 goals in her first 2 games. That matches the number of goals she scored in all 20 of her appearances last year. And shout out to Spokane Shadows Bailey Trejo. She has had a goal and 2 assists in her first 2 games. Shout out all the Gonzaga players who stepped up and replaced the incredible transfers from last year's team, and they're already kicking ass. Aaron Ewers, Amelia Severn, Olivia Lester, Hannah Gray, Abby Cecilia. Shout out Coach Benz and the leaders in the team like Lauren Town for not hanging your heads and making excuses and instead coming back from that loss against Arkansas with a really impressive win in Kansas. Shout out to our friend Abby Carcio. Abby has opened up her season as the interim head coach at Roger Williams University with 2 wins on the spin. Let's go, Abby. And finally, shout out to the following supporters: Ronald Sanchez Jr., Brooks Sackett, and Stephen Keller. I really appreciate you. It means a lot to me. If you would like to support the Spokane Soccer Show, you can. You go to the website, SpokaneSoccerShow.com/donate. If you can't afford it, or you just don't want to, no worries. But what you could do is maybe give the podcast a follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because what that does, every time a new episode drops, it immediately downloads it to your device. And from there, you don't even have to have an internet connection. It'll just be sitting there waiting for your thirsty ears to take a drink on that road trip or long commute. That would do me a lot of good. Just give the podcast a follow. All right, let's talk about the schedule this week. There are going to be 3 home games at one stadium, starting with tonight at 6 p.m. Velocity FC are hosting Union Omaha. This game, in case you didn't realize it, is going to be nationally televised on CBS. It's like the character from Monsters, Inc., Mikey, the Billy Crystal character. Look, Mom, I was on TV. So that could be you. You don't know where CBS is going to point their cameras. Tonight, we are also launching the Double Pivot Pub Ale down at Flat Stick. I will probably be down there at like 3 o'clock, maybe 3:30. It's a collaboration between the Spokane Soccer Show and Wildland Co-op, my newest sponsor. We made a signature beer together. And if you're a member of the 509 Syndicate, it's $1 off your pint of Double Pivot Pub Ale, so I will see you down there soon. And if you're not already a member of the 509 Syndicate, you can go to the509syndicate.com. Of course, the O is a 0. Velocity FC turn around 3 days later and host Central Valley Fuego Saturday, 6 p.m. That team is playing really well. These games matter a lot. Both of these games. So the game against Union Omaha, the game against Central Valley Fuego. There's only 9 games left, I believe, in the regular season of League One. We want to make the playoffs. So it's really important that we show up to these games. Let's all go down to Flat Stick. We'll go to Flat Stick 3 times. There's 3 games this week at one stadium, 3 marches, 3 chances to go to Flat Stick and try some Double Pivot Pub Ale. I am nothing if not a salesman. The next day, Sunday, 6 p.m., Zephyr FC have their second game hosting Brooklyn FC. So much soccer. Other games that I'm going to be monitoring, if not attending. Whitworth women will be hosting Northwest University at 3 p.m. on Saturday at Whitworth Soccer Field. And the Gonzaga men will be hosting Utah Tech at 7 p.m. on Thursday at Luger Field. Both of those fields are amazing. Great venues to watch soccer. If you haven't been, you need to go watch some college soccer. So that's it for the housekeeping part of the podcast. And before we meet our guest, Giana Riley, I want to talk a little bit about the professionalization of college sports and what that means for fans. I made a post to Instagram last Thursday, the day that the Gonzaga women's team lost 4-0 against Arkansas. Okay. And what I was pointing out was just how challenging and kind of confusing and sometimes honestly a little bit heartbreaking it can be as a fan of college sports, really. It's not just soccer. This isn't limited to any single sport. Anywhere that NIL and the transfer portal, and I know in basketball, football, and soccer, this is coming up a lot, right? Gonzaga's basketball team has benefited a lot from using the transfer portal. Like football teams are doing this all the time. This is just the way that the college sports are going to be from now on, and for as long as college sports exist. And I'm not going to go into a deep dive about that, but as a fan, right, I watched that team last year have so much success. First tournament since 2005, first time ever getting to the second round. There was just so much vibe, such a great team, and so much excitement going into this year, right? So all those transfers take place. If you haven't seen the post that I made reference to the fact that Maddie Kemp, Giana Riley, Kelsey Euler, Kate Doyle, Grace Corder, Shelby Roon, and Kaya Lee had all left Gonzaga's team. Most of those players were going to have a really big role coming into this year. 2 of them preseason All-Americans, 2 of them on the Herman Trophy watch list. So a great deal of excitement. And it was, I don't know who was masochistic enough to put Arkansas on the schedule, but 2 of those players went to Arkansas. One of those All-Americans, preseason All-Americans, Kelsey Euler, and Kate Doyle, who had 7 goals and 4 appearances last year with Gonzaga before suffering a torn ACL. Well, Kate Doyle is very much recovered from that ACL injury, and she is scoring goals for fun, but doing so for Arkansas. So it was a really tough game to watch. I made an observation that both of those players had a role in 2 of the 4 goals that were scored. Kelsey had 2 assists, one of them to Kate Doyle. Kate Doyle had 2 goals. So it was tough to watch. And I'm sure for the players, it was tough to experience. It's one of the reasons I was super impressed with how they bounced back and got the win against Kansas. But this is just what it means to be a fan in 2024. This college portal, transfer portal, NIL thing shook up and forever changed. Like this is not just an evolution to the sport and to college sports. This is a revolutionary change to college sports, and it will never be the same again. The college sports have been fully professionalized, and before it's like, who benefited from all the money that was generated from college sports? Well, not the players. And that was wrong. It shouldn't have been that way. And I'm glad that things have changed, but it's also tough. It's challenging. It's confusing, and it can be a little bit sad too, right? But the other thing it means is there's an opportunity now to support these different players. This is just the way things happen. You get new players, there's turnover. So I mentioned at the start of the podcast in my shout out of all those players who stepped into the roles left by those transfers. Some of those players are playing exceptionally well. Like Amelia Severn has stepped into that role left by Maddie Kemp. Ironically, Erin Ewers has stepped into a lot of the role that was left by Giana Riley, and she's scoring goals, and that's going to be needed. So that's what it means to be a fan. You still show up. It's the next player up, next coach up. I'm happy for Coach Benz. This is so fun to watch this new narrative. Yeah, it's going to have its moments. It's going to have lots of ups and downs as a fan, and certainly for the players and the coaches. But that's just the nature of sports. This was a necessary change in college sports, but it's also, I think it's cool. It's a fun part of being a fan is that you see changes, and you like one player leaves and another one replaces them, and you support that new player. That's just what it means to be a fan. And I use that as a segue to talk about this fantastic DM that I got from a listener of the Spokane Soccer Show talking about Velocity FC. This comment came from Chris, and here's what Chris had to say. Benji, with season ticket re-up emails and social media blasts going out, it leads to questions about what the team will look like next season. The club website and socials provide slim pickings concerning player contracts, injury updates, etc. Fans typically only see news on new signings and match results. Not sure if this is just the way of USL and my expectations are too high. Maybe the transitory nature of the league with players bouncing in and out and all around just makes it impossible to say with any confidence where players and coaches will be from one season to the next. TLDR, are we being asked to re-up based on faith that next season's team will provide the same smiles, laughs, frustrations, etc.? All that great stuff we've seen this season with our inaugural roster with no guarantees we'll recognize anyone who steps out of the tunnel. asking you because you were the soccer guy of Spokane and have access we don't. Thanks. That's awesome, Chris. And I can't wait to talk about this. Let me just start by comparing this to my example of the Gonzaga women's team. All right. So these players leave, these high profile players, and they're replaced. And the players that came in behind them, you support them. This is natural in college sports even before the transfer portal. What made this such a unique situation with the Gonzaga is obviously that team was really, really stacked and you lost a lot of juniors and seniors. Okay. But there's still someone who comes in and steps in and you get behind that player. I think about the, injury to Pierre Reedy, which has clearly been long-term, and he was replaced by Masongo Akale. We all really like cheering on Masongo, and we can't wait to see Pierre Reedy when he recovers and returns. Or if a player leaves the club, there will be some players that'll probably leave. How many? I don't know. I think I'll be surprised if we don't retain the vast majority of the players that we've all come to love watch playing. If a player is contributing and they're doing a good job, I'll bet you're going to see them again next year. I'll just say that. I have had conversations with the front office and the owners, and I will say with confidence that they're going to bring back the core of this team next year. A lot of the way that the contracts work is that if a player is doing well, then they're probably going to come back, but because of where League One is in the pyramid, you can look at it like this. If a player is not doing well, you can go either direction with this. If you're not doing well, you might not be on the team next year. If you're doing really, really well, the bigger teams might come calling, whether it's the championship or in MLS or some club overseas. Let's not forget, back in late July, South Georgia Tormenta sold a player named Nick Akoto to Burton Albion FC. That was the highest transfer in League One history to a team in England's League One. Another thing that comes up for me is you're going to always support these players. If you've spent any time down at the stadium or if you've run into any of these players locally, whether it's Ahmed Longmire or Javier Martin Hill, it doesn't matter, any of these players. And if they move on to another club at some point in their career, which is going to happen probably, right? It's inevitably going to happen. That's the nature of sports. You're going to support them. It doesn't matter where they go. You're going to be super stoked for those players because you invested some time and emotion and energy in the success of these players. And whether they're playing here or not, you're still going to support them. And it's going to be really cool. And then new players will come in and you'll support them as well. It's not like minor league baseball. It just isn't. No one ever has a relationship to any of those players. They're here for like 25 minutes, man. Like nobody cares. This is very different. And so that's my way of saying, I absolutely encourage you to, not worry about like who shows up next year. But if that is a concern to you, I think you're going to be pretty happy with who comes back for this team next year. But, again, if our players are good enough to play in the MLS, I'm going to be thrilled for those players. So I feel the same way about these players that left Gonzaga. I'm thrilled for Kate Doyle. Yeah, she just put the sting on us. She put 2 goals past Gonzaga, but I'm still thrilled for her. I congratulated her after the game. Like, that's awesome. You want these people to have a good relationship to this town too. Who knows where Kate Doyle's career will take her. If she wants to play professional soccer, I hope one day she thinks fondly about her time at Gonzaga and the way that this community supported her, whether she was playing for Gonzaga or not. Same thing for any of these professional players. This is what's happening here, folks. This ecosystem of soccer in Spokane is extremely exciting because these college players, you never know. They may end up playing for one of these professional teams, men or women. Like, that's the time that we live in Spokane right now. So I'm going to support these players wherever they go. Same with, of course, guest of this podcast today, Giana Riley. So here's my TLDR. If you love this sport as much as I do, you show up and you support these teams through thick and thin. And if you're still learning about the sport and you like what you've seen so far, stick around. I hope you enjoy this podcast. I am watching as much local soccer and highlighting as many players and clubs as my schedule will currently allow. Follow my friend Gerald, who works for the Spokane Sounders and Spokane Shadow. He has an Instagram page, INW Soccer News. Definitely follow that page. If you ever have questions about something, it could be tactical, it could be about a player, it could be about anything. Send me an email, SpokaneSoccerShow@gmail.com. Send me a DM on Instagram. If I don't know the answer to your question, I'll find somebody who does. One other thing I'll say about Velocity FC, this will apply to Zephyr FC as well. This front office and these owners, they're competitive. They want to compete. They want to win things. They're not going to be happy if they don't make the playoffs. They're not going to be happy if they don't win things. They want to compete and they want to be one of the best teams in USL's League One or in the USL Super League. But they also won't sign anybody who's an asshole or who's just a bad fit. One bad signing on a team in that team, and I know this has happened. I can just tell you, I've had conversations with the team about this. There have been players that they've passed up that might have been really talented, but might not have been a great fit. So they're not going to just sign anybody. They've said this since day one. You can read between the lines. High character, high capability as a soccer player. You got to be both of those things or they won't sign you. Okay, let's introduce my guest. Giana Riley's importance to the Spokane Soccer Show can't really be overstated. The very first game I ever went to watch that Gonzaga team last year was a 3-0 thrashing of Arizona at Luger Field. I went with my daughter Ivy and her soccer team from 90 plus. And the Spokane Soccer Show didn't even exist yet. But there was something about that experience of watching that team that made me want to get started on the projects even sooner than I had intended. I was going to wait until there was professional soccer being played in Spokane, but watching that Gonzaga team made me feel like I'm going to do this now. And I'll start by talking about this team because I think they're special. Maybe that was somewhat serendipitous. Maybe somebody else could have pointed out, of course they're good. They were ranked in the top 25 like multiple times last year. I mean, I was definitely late to the bandwagon. It was in September 20th, I think, was when they played that game against Arizona. And I made a post to my personal Instagram page, and I specifically pointed out the performance of Giana Riley because she was magnificent. And she even had a goal that was an assist provided by Kelsey Euler. And she and Kelsey are both gone now, and they're on that Herman Trophy watch list that I keep talking about so much. But you know what? As I have mentioned in the introduction to this podcast, I will support these players no matter where they end up in their careers. This is very much a player-first podcast. This episode of the Spokane Soccer Show is brought to you by Feast World Kitchen. If you know, you know. If you don't know, I'm about to tell you. Think authentic, mouth-watering cuisine from all over the world delivered to your mouth right here in downtown Spokane. Here's the part you might not have known. Feast is a nonprofit that effectively creates chef entrepreneurs by offering a bunch of programs where immigrants and former refugees learn career skills, earn income from their food sales, and build connections in the community. Quick sidebar, I still have daydreams about the beef sambusas and the spicy jollof rice that we had during the AFCON watch party in January. But don't take my word for it. Head down to Feast World Kitchen on 3rd Avenue, follow them on Instagram, or go to their website at feastworldkitchen.org. So let's talk about my guest. Giana Riley played for Gonzaga for 2 years. In that time, she meant a lot to that team. She scored a hat trick against Pepperdine in their final conference game of last year, which secured a WCC title for the first time in the program's history. She transferred to the defending national champion Florida State over last winter, and she's been playing with the U.S. Youth National Team Under 20 team since earlier this year. She's actually in Colombia with the team right now at the Women's World Cup. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Giana Riley. The great Giana Riley. Welcome to the Spokane Soccer Show. This is a massive honor for me. I just have to tell you at the start of this conversation, the first thing I did this morning when I pick up my phone, as we all do, what do we do when we pick up our phones for the first time in the day, Giana? If you're anything like me.
My social media, sadly.
You got to check the grams, right? So first thing I see in my social media feed is this extremely wholesome video taken from Parque Usaquén in Bogota. Tell me what I saw this morning, G.
Yes. We went out to go to a flea market, and then we kind of went exploring, and there was this court, and kids were playing soccer, and we're four of my teammates were oh, let's go play against them. And so we had the police officer that we were with ask them if they wanted to do a 4v4, and we played them.
Was it just totally random?
Yeah, it was pretty random. We saw them because we were going to get crepes, I think, and we were wait, we should play with them before. Let's that would be fun. And so we walked over and asked.
You know, it's funny. I actually Googled that park just to make sure I could get the pronunciation correct, or at least kind of have an understanding of what it was. And I think it was some video that I found of some tourists that were literally going to go to get crepes somewhere. So it must be a popular thing to do in that area of Bogota. That's awesome. Okay, so let's paint the picture here a little bit of where Giana Riley is right now. World traveling soccer player. You are in Bogota because you are participating in what? What's going on with you? What are you doing?
I'm here for the U20 World Cup.
Like, how did this start? Talk to me a little bit about your background with playing for the U.S. Youth National Team under 20 team. When did that start? Was it last winter?
It was after the Pepperdine game. The head coach, Tracy Kevins, came up to me and like introduced herself. And I was like in shock. Like, I don't think I said anything. My like jaw just kind of dropped. I was like, and I shook her hand. And then she like kind of said, well, we'll be in touch or something along those lines. And then my coach said that he had a Zoom with her. It was me, my parents, and then Coach Chris. We all hopped on a Zoom with Coach Tracy, the head coach. And we talked about like my aspirations and like if they were to be on the national team and what that would look like for me. And then there was a camp coming up in January, and they said that they would get like I would receive an email if I'm like going to be invited. And I got the email in like December. I think it was after Christmas. So it was kind of like a late Christmas present. It like took a while because when I didn't hear from them before Christmas, I was like, oh, like I'm not going. Like it kind of got sad. But then getting the call and them telling me that I was invited to the camp was just an amazing experience.
Oh, that's awesome. So it was the game in Malibu where you scored a hat trick against Pepperdine to help Gonzaga. I mean, not to help. I mean, that was the game that led to Gonzaga winning the WCC title for the first time. So that after that game was when this original conversation took place.
She said that they had been watching for a while, but she was there in person at that game. So she just came up and introduced herself.
And you were on this team with a couple of your now Florida State teammates, including, I think, Jordan Dudley and a couple other players.
Taylor Suarez and Heather Gilchrist.
Early on, when you started to play for the U.S. youth team, the under 20 team, was Jordan already on the team? Or for that matter, was Taylor and Heather?
Yeah, I believe that they all went to like the CONCACAF tournament that helped them qualify for the World Cup. But yeah, I think all three of them were there.
Oh, okay. See, I have this sense that it's like, I'm sure you're familiar with this tendency in the NBA that when a lot of those players will go to the Olympics together, they'll start chatting about their NBA teams that they're playing for and how they should like get together in free agency and like, you know, team up, form super teams. I can't talk myself out of thinking that you go play for the youth national team and you're with your Florida State teammates. And it's kind of like, what would it be like if we all played together in the same college?
As we got closer, they kind of like, and as the camps went on, they kind of mentioned like, just like jokes about like, oh, like, cause I'd be like, Spokane's so cold. And they're like, oh, Florida's hot. Like you should come. And like, just make jokes like that. But it was not ever really a topic of conversation. Like we're like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if we were all together. But it was just more jokes.
I don't have any idea how the whole portal system works, but from my understanding, it's kind of like, well, you just put your name out there and then teams are like notified effectively that you are interested in potentially transferring, and then you get like teams will approach you. Is that loosely how it works?
Basically, yeah. You just go to your compliance person, let them know that you want to enter the portal. Then the day that the portal opens, depending on like the person, you might get an email right away. You might get a phone call, text message, whatever. But there's an option that you can have no coaches contact you, like in a case that you know where you want to go already. But
yeah, did you kind of know where you wanted to go?
I think beforehand I had an idea, had a couple schools in mind. And on the first day, like the schools that I had in mind, they all reached out. So
another thing that I had to wonder about, because you posted something about this the other day, you were some photos from your early games. You've had 2 games so far that you've played with Florida State, and you said something to the effect of, "Going to miss this place," and I got all worried. I was like, wait, Giana can't be hurt. No. And I'm like, I DM'd you. I'm like,
Yeah.
are you all right? You're like, yeah, I'm playing for the U.S. Youth National Team. I'm at the World Cup in Colombia. And I was like, oh, okay. So it went from me being worried to me being like totally stoked for you. But meanwhile, you and 3 of your teammates are there and you're not able to be with your college team. Like, what has the feeling been like when you chat with Jordan and your other teammates?
It's been like we watched their last game against Rice, and like we have full confidence in our team back home, but it's also there's a part of me that wants to be there and be able to like help and be on the field, but like have full trust that they'll get the job done. And so it's more of just even when I'm playing in the game, I get nervous and like I don't know how it's gonna go. Like typically I feel like we're gonna win, but like just now watching from afar, it's like you really have no control over what happens that game. So we kind of just we're all feeling that together and just there for each other.
You mentioned yesterday to me that you did watch Gonzaga's first game against Kansas State. What was it like seeing the team go out there on Luger Field for the first time, which I believe was the first time since the game against Idaho in the tournament?
Yeah. It was a little weird, like seeing them and then not being out there with them because like those are all my good friends. But I don't know. It was good to watch them get the dub. And Chelsea scored a banger off the volley, which was super nice. With her left foot too, because she's right-footed. It was insane. I don't like takes a lot of concentration for sure. There was like space and time in front of her, but just for her to take it off, I think was it her chest, and then to volley is super cool.
Yeah, and the ball has so much rotation on it, and it's spinning away from the goal toward Chelsea, and she ends up generating top spin. It's just wild. The technique on that moment. You're right. She's a right-footed player. It's totally crazy. This is the part that I never really got to chat with you at any length, but you also were on the Gonzaga basketball team. Did your success in soccer lead to an end to that? Like, tell me about that whole experience.
This was my freshman year, the end of our season. Like, my coach called me while I was in class, and like he never really called me, so I was like, maybe I should answer this. And so I walked out of class and I answered. He was like, did you used to play basketball? And I was like, yeah, in high school, like was on varsity for 4 years. Like he was like, are you any good? And I was like, well, I was in high school, but like it's been a while since I've touched a basketball. And he was like, well, the basketball team, like they've have a lot of injuries right now and they're down to 7. Like, do you mind if I give the coach your number? And I was like, I do not mind at all. Like, I would love that. And so, like, a couple of days later, I got a text message from the coach and to set up a call. And at that point, I had flown home for Christmas break. So we were just chatting. It felt like a recruiting call, though. So he asked me all the questions about myself, what type of basketball player was I, and, like, let me know what my role would be if I decided to, like, do it. And then they were like, can you be here Monday? And I was like, I'm already home, but I told them yes. And so I flew back I think it was Saturday. So Sunday I flew back and then I was there Monday and was there at practice.
Tell me a little bit about how you did end up at Gonzaga. What's the story of how you first were on the radar of Coach Chris Watkins at the time and how you ended up making your way to playing for Gonzaga?
I had received an email, but I was like, I don't know where this school is. I've never heard of it. Like, I'm not going there. So I kind of pushed them off. And then they just kept being persistent, kept contacting me, kept emailing me. And then I was like, okay, like I'll hop on a Zoom. And I actually really like the coaches. Like, I'm kind of an awkward person. So like with other coaches and being on the Zoom, like if I wasn't talking, like they really weren't talking. And so we just sit there in silence and it's weird. But like they made me feel really comfortable and I was able to like talk to them, I guess, and like actually have a conversation. And they seemed really nice. And I think I was like, I want to go to a school that seems to want me more than I actually want to go there. Because that meant like they would value me better. And I would want to go to school that I actually could get on the field. And I felt like I could do that at Gonzaga. And I got there and like I played a lot. So I had a dream because I was picking between my final 3 schools or 2. And I had a dream the night before I committed that I was on the campus of Gonzaga, and I had never been because it was during COVID. So I was like, well, that's a sign. Guess I got to go. And then the next day I committed.
Oh, I love hearing that. I mean, you describing yourself as awkward, it kind of kills me. I think of you in my time of interacting with you that you're funny. You have a great sense of humor. You keep things light. You're really kind. And I remember Coach Watkins telling a story about how the way that you would sometimes communicate would just catch him off guard. He said one time he was sitting in his office. I think he shared this on the podcast, that you just walked in, didn't say anything, just gave him knuckles and then left. And he was just kind of like, what just happened? Looked over at his assistant coaches like, what? The Spokane Soccer Show is supported by Spokane City Credit Union. Are you a customer at a big dumb bank? Well, stop it. At a bank, you're just a customer. At a credit union, you're a member and a shareholder. You can help make decisions about what the credit union does do or doesn't do. Banks just want to get bigger by swallowing up smaller banks one at a time until there's only one or two banks left. Nobody wants that. Well, except for big banks. Since 1934, Spokane City Credit Union has remained independent, relevant, and local, with a focus on the financial needs of individuals and families in Spokane City. Go to sccu.net, Spokane City Credit Union, serving Spokane one member at a time. I'm going to paint a little picture for my listeners, for people who are new to the podcast that don't remember that the very earliest experience that I had when I was thinking about starting the podcast was watching you play. I mean, the first game I ever saw was a 3-0 victory over Arizona. You probably remember this game. And I became immediately immersed with that team. You scored the first one. Our friend Marissa Garcia scored the second one. Paige scored the third one. And Kelsey Euler assisted all 3 goals. It was just an incredible game. I remember Lauren had a few incredible saves. Grace Corder stepped up. She was pretty immense on the back line. And then, I start following that team very closely for the rest of that season, all the way through the loss in the second round against UC Irvine. You scored that hat trick against Pepperdine in Malibu. Gonzaga wins the WCC for the first time ever. Okay. You win a tournament game. The team, Gonzaga, wins a tournament game for the first time ever. You finished your career with Gonzaga. I've got your stats, G. With 34 appearances, 17 goals, 7 assists in under 2,000 minutes, and you had a shot on target percentage of 56%. And I want my listeners to know how accurate that is, because the average Champions League team is their players are typically around 35% of their shots that are on target. So this is what you have going for you heading into last winter, right? And I sit down and I have a chat with Coach Watkins, and we're both like so excited, this next season's going to be amazing. But I also understand this is college soccer. What happened with this team and the transfers is just the nature of what's going on, where opportunities that are sometimes too huge to pass up. And I can't think of a better example of that than when the defending national champions get in touch. But talk to me a little bit about your experience of last winter and what that was like for you.
Going into my sophomore season, I just wanted to have an impact, whether I'm scoring goals, assisting goals, assisting the assister. Like, I just wanted to have a bigger impact than I did my freshman year. And knowing that the players that had left my freshman year, like, I had the opportunity to do that. And so I had a bet, not really a bet, but like, if I had scored 12 goals by midway through the season, Coach Katie would make a TikTok with me. But I didn't end up doing it because after for all of non-conference games, like, I scored the 9 goals, but at like all of conference, I didn't really score. So kind of went into a slump. But then Pepperdine came, and then it was a big moment. We just like win and we win the conference, or lose and we lose the conference. So my freshman year, I think we finished 3rd in the conference, and I was pretty confident that we'd make it to the tournament, but we didn't. So when that Pepperdine came, it felt like there was no other option but to win. And I think I had the worst warm-up of my life that game. I was crying. Coach Katie had to pull me aside and be like, it's okay, like relax, like you got this. But as soon as the whistle blew, I forgot the warm up, and it was like felt like a new day. And after the first goal, it was like, oh, we got this. Like this is in reach. After the second goal, actually, the second goal
was the free kick.
I think Kemp wanted to take it, but Coach Chris called her off and was like, no, Giana, take it. So I was like, don't mind if I do. And then I got up there and went in. It was surreal. I kind of blacked out after that. I don't really remember. I just saw it go in and I was like, well, no way that just happened. But then I get subbed out and I was like, okay, like we got this. Like this is in reach. Like I felt like I was on edge the whole time, just waiting for the 90th minute to come. And then the third goal happened and I was like, okay, like it's ours. Like we won, but we still had to game manage, As soon as the whistle blew, I think I was crying. It just felt so surreal. Like we actually did it.
Yeah. You're giving me flashbacks to all those moments. And I remember talking to you up at the campus, and I remember pointing out, like, you came into that game having scored no goals in the conference, and you were like, yeah, it was a big relief, and it all came at once. It was a tidal wave of goals and unforgettable moments for you. So then announcement comes that Coach Watkins is leaving, and then shortly after that, Kelsey and a couple other players announced that they're leaving. And talk to me about your experience of like what that was like to go through that winter, knowing that a lot of that team wasn't going to be back, and that you were facing your own decision about what to do.
When I heard Coach was leaving, I was like, I was so confused. I was like, wait, why would he leave? Like, we just won. There's like so much to look forward to for next season. And I was kind of scared. But then I talked to some of my teammates, talked to head coach Katie, and I was more of like reassured, like everything will be okay. And then Kelsey decided that she was going to leave. So then I was like, oh, okay. We still got this. Like I was still in the state of like, there's a lot of unknown, confused. Like I just wanted to see, like I hadn't really thought about leaving. I was like, I'll see what this spring is like. Still didn't really think about it much. Then I think it was towards the end. I went to a couple of camps and like going there and the level being high and coming back. Like it's the spring, so it's not going to be the same as the fall because we lost players and just we're not really playing for anything but just playing to get better. So the level might feel a little different, but just going to camp and coming back and just seeing the gap in the level is like I wanted to be able to go into camp and then come out of camp and go back into my home environment and it be relatively the same, if not like the exact same. So I think that was part of my big decision, like a part of why I decided.
When you're saying camp, Giana,
leave.
you're referring to playing with the national team, I assume?
Yeah.
I have always looked at it like this, very candidly. Whether it's Coach Watkins, it's any of you players, these are opportunities. This is where college athletics are, and there's the lines are being blurred between college sports and professional sports all the time. The recent collective bargaining from the NWSL, and I know you're paying attention to this, there will be no draft. It's going to be direct free agency. There's a lot more power and I think resource and money going to be given to players in that new collective bargaining agreement, which is awesome. So I don't think anybody can ever, I've said this on my podcast, nobody can judge people's decisions over their careers or their choices when it comes to these things. And when the defending national champions call, it's awesome. I mean, tell me a little bit about that part. You've got 4-time national champion Florida State Seminoles under new coach Brian Pensky, who won the national championship. I believe that was his first year as a head coach, right?
I think it might have been his second.
Was it? Okay. They come calling. Talk to me a little bit about that experience of going to Tallahassee and joining that team.
He was actually one of the first emails I received when my name went into the portal and like came the day, he was actually the first. So that was a pretty good feeling. And so we had a couple of Zooms. I think just watching them last year and seeing how dominant they were, it was just made it an easy decision. So the weather was a big adjustment for sure, but the environment's great. Everyone, like when I first got there, I couldn't tell who was a freshman, who was a sophomore. Like I didn't know whose class was who. I didn't know who the captains were. Like everyone was just seemed to be on the same page, and like everyone really, like they hung out a lot. So that was cool to see. And like it helped to have the 3 teammates that I do have here. Like I knew them from coming to camp, so it helped to have them there. And like everyone was really welcoming. The coaches were super nice, all the staff, strength coach, like trainers, everyone's super nice, super welcoming. So I think it's been a pretty smooth transition.
I mean, it says a lot that was the first email you received, and it's from, for crying out loud, the defending national champions. So
yeah.
3 of your teammates, I mentioned this on my last podcast for my listeners. I'll say it again, are on what's called the Herman Trophy watch list. The Herman Trophy is given to the best college soccer player. You, alongside Jordan Dudley and Taylor Huff, are all on that watch list. And in your first 2 games, you had a goal and an assist. Talk to me a little bit about Coach Brian Penske's system. Is it a different system than you're used to? I see that you're still playing out on the left.
The right, but...
Are you?
Yeah, I'm on the right.
So I watched some highlights from the South Florida game.
Yeah, I played on the left.
You thought you had a goal in the back post, and then you scored your goal coming in from the left. Was it a switch or something?
Yeah, I ended up on the left a little bit in the beginning of that game, but I started on the right.
Which that sounds typical for anybody who is familiar with your game last year. You and Marissa would do this all the time.
Yeah, I think his style of play is similar to what I'm going to keep comparing it to camp, but it's similar to what we do here at camp. Like if our fullbacks come high, we invert, like they're facing forward to have runs, like always be moving, always be checking into the space, always be ready to make a run forward and get in behind.
What's the part of your game that you're working on the most right now?
I think getting into good spaces, like being able to support my teammates and when they have the ball, and just getting in, making runs, like always anticipating what's next.
Looking for space. Taps it into the box. The shot from Riley is in. The first is a Florida State Seminole for Giana Riley. 3-0 Garnet in goal.
Okay, I have one more kind of dorky soccer question to ask you. You wore the number 5 for Gonzaga, and I've noticed that you've kept that number. What's the significance of that number for you?
The number 5 means, in like the Bible, it's the number of grace. My name, Giana, means God is gracious. So I kind of like put the 2 and 2 together. So I always try to get number 5 if I can.
Oh, that's beautiful. When did that start for you?
I think in 8th grade. My dad told me what the number 5 meant, and I was like, wait, my name. So I kind of just put them together.
You know me well enough to know that I was going to take a guess at why the number 5. So I did look up some famous players that wear number 5, and I could only think like maybe Zidane. I was like, I don't know, Giana and Zinedine Zidane. Would that be who she'd model her game after? That didn't make a ton of sense. So your explanation makes way more sense. I just have to point out to you, I felt like I had to get you on this podcast before you became too famous for me. So I'm so glad you're doing it. Talk to me about where you see yourself in 3 years, because obviously you are going to be playing this sport for a very long time. Where do you see yourself in 3 years, Giana Riley?
In 3 years, I see myself being in the NWSL. I don't know what team. I do have preferences, but yeah. And on the senior national team.
Oh, I like that. You know, it's interesting. I was looking at this news of the end of the NWSL draft, and I want to get your feelings on that. But it is funny. I just have to share the story. So I was doing a little research in preparation for chatting with you today, and I go to Top Drawer Soccer's website and see their story about the NWSL draft and collective bargaining and all that. And there's a story, of course, right there on their cover of Jordan Dudley, your teammate. So it's like, all right, this is obviously a topic of conversation. How have you felt about some of the news that you've read about the collective bargaining in the NWSL?
I think it's exciting. to see the change that's happening and putting more power into the players' hands. Like the draft really before, like it was cool, good experience to go there and like hear your name being called, but it didn't really necessarily mean anything. You kind of still had to go like prove yourself and earn a contract. But now everything's guaranteed, so you know that you'll be on the team that like you're at. It's like some people before I didn't really know much about the draft, so I'm like, oh, this person got drafted to Kansas City, but now they're playing in Mexico. Like, how does that work? But so like now things like that won't really be happening.
Was some part of you sad knowing that the draft would now be no longer a possibility for you?
A little. There's a small part of me sad for sure, because just to have the opportunity to go, I don't know where it was going to be this year, but like last year was in LA, to go and hear your name called and then have the like to take the picture with the scarf and like be there with all the players. So to have that opportunity, to not have that opportunity just makes me a little sad, but to now know that wherever I go, it's guaranteed and I get to choose it based on interest. So
yeah, when you compare the situation of what we were describing with the current state of college soccer and the most outstanding players having some choice over what they do with their college careers as soccer players, it's so odd. And this is for many reasons. I'm happy for the women's game that the NWSL is no longer going to have a draft. If you've paid any attention to the USL Super League, they also don't have a draft. That you wouldn't have choice over where you have the ability to play professionally. It's strange, and I'm glad it's going away. I know it's a big part of American sports, but I don't think it's good for players. It's good for owners. Oh, well, I went there, so let me ask you, are you paying attention to the Super League at all? Has that hit your radar?
A little bit, yeah. Like I watched a little bit of the Zypher, their highlights and stuff. And like Sophie Braun's on that team, so trying to keep up with how they're doing and stuff. And like, I think my summer team, Cal Storm, that they're interested in like getting a Super League team. I'm not sure how that works, but yeah.
That's super cool. Okay, I have a California Storm question. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Were you no longer able to play with them this summer because of your commitments to the national team?
Well, I played with them whenever I was home. So whenever I was home, I would play with them.
And did you play with Alyssa Bourgeois?
Yeah, she's super good.
Oh, that's so cool. I love the like, to me, it seems like really fun and kind of quaint how many of these relationships I'm striking between these players and these clubs and the college game as well as the professional game, to see that that game where, and the announcers brought it up on the Zephyr broadcast about Alyssa Bourgeois, the last time that she was in Spokane. It was when Gonzaga beat Santa Clara 1-0. Chelsea had that amazing PK off the post. And this announcer kind of went on about it. I thought it was really amusing. I didn't even realize until she had been signed by Zephyr that she played for California Storm. I was like, okay, so she was Giana's teammate. This episode of the Spokane Soccer Show is brought to you by Great Harvest Bread Company. If you live in Spokane, you already know that's the place to buy your bread. Every week, my family gets a loaf of Farmhouse White and Harvest sourdough, and we're set for toast and sandwiches. And while you're there, grab those giant cinnamon rolls and a bag of their legendary monster cookies. You know what else is great about Great Harvest? Every time you spend money there, you will know you're supporting a worker-owned business. For over 30 years, Great Harvest has been baking truly one-of-a-kind, simple, wholesome, and delicious baked goods. What are you into outside of sports, Giana? Like, what are some hobbies and passions that you have?
I like nature. I don't really have time to like go on hikes and like walks really, but I do like being outside. I love hanging out with my little brother, Jonathan. He is 5. He's about to turn 6 in November. He keeps me, I'm not that old, but like he keeps me young. Like he always wants to play, always wants to do stuff, always wants to like go outside, throw a football, go play soccer. Although it is a little hard for me to play soccer with him because he's only 5, but I just feel like he should be better than he is. So it's a little frustrating, but I'm working on it. Working on being nicer when it comes to soccer.
You're working on being nicer and having more patience for your 5-year-old little brother.
Yeah. Sounds bad, but
that's awesome. Well, he will only become a much better soccer player by having you as a big sister. So shout out to your little brother.
I was just going to say I just got a dog, so that will keep me busy outside of soccer.
What kind of dog did you get, Giana?
A Maltese and a Poodle mix.
Oh my goodness, my daughters would be so happy. We have a Havanese poodle mix, and we have a Havanese full breed dog that we love both of them. But when you mix poodles with things, it tends to be a really, really fun dog. So you're going to have a blast with that.
Yes.
Oh, that's really fun. Boy or girl?
He's a boy.
Name?
Leo. My other dog's Messi, so like Leo Messi.
Okay. All right. We have to ask the obligatory question because you went there. This is your fault, G. Who's the GOAT? Is it Messi? Do I already know?
Yeah. It's Messi.
Okay, that's the correct answer. I'm starting to ask that for any guest that I get on the Spokane Soccer Show, so I'm glad I asked you. All right, Giana, your first game in the U.S. Youth National Team Under-20 World Cup is going to be against Spain on Sunday in Cali. You're going to travel to Cali for that game. What are your thoughts leading into that game? What are you looking forward to?
I'm excited. I'm excited to have a first real game. Like the friendlies were a way to help prepare, and hopefully I won't be as nervous as I was then. But I'm excited to see all the work we put in over the past year come together with all the 18. I don't know how many of us are here. 21 girls. Excited to see all of it come together and be in a tournament environment with everyone.
On the technical side of the game, Spain seems to be pretty superb right now at all levels of both the men's and women's game. So are there things that you expect to see that are going to be challenging from this Spain team that you're going to play?
I think, like you said, they're technically very good. So we're just going to try and play our game, play how we've been playing, and make adjustments as needed.
Awesome. Well, I have to say, I want to show off my new shirt. I just had this done. Spokane Soccer Show. Here you go. Best vibes only. And it's very easy to have the best vibes only when I'm talking to you, Giana. I want to tell you that this has been an absolute joy and an honor. I don't care where you end up in your career. I'm going to be following very closely. I mean, I can't tell you how much that team last year meant to me. Anyone who's listened to this podcast since the beginning already knows that. But if you're new to the podcast, that team was very special. It'll always have a place in my heart and in my mind and in my soul. Ivy and I are tearing apart our house right now, looking for our bucket hats. I can't find my bucket hat, G. I'm so sad. And Ivy's has Kelsey and Mars' signature on it. So now I have to find that so I can send it to you and get your signature. This is unbelievable. I can't find my hat either. I'm super sad about that.
I hope you find it. And when you do, you can send it to me at any time, and I'll sign it and send it back.
Awesome. Giana Riley, thank you so much for being on the Spokane Soccer Show. Good luck to you. Travel safely and go get that first win against Spain on Sunday. We'll hope to talk again soon.
For sure. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Excited. I was a little sad I missed the one with you, Kelsey, and Coach, but happy to be here now.
I'm glad we got to do this now. Good luck in your career with Florida State, of course, and I'll be watching this season. And anytime you do anything in soccer, it goes on the Spokane Soccer Show page because you're forever part of the DNA of the Spokane Soccer Show. And yeah, I can't wait to continue watching your career. Good luck, Giana, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.